Hello, everybody. It's Andrea. Today, I'm going to try to keep it short to offset yesterday's 15-minute long podcast. I want to discuss Trump's announcement about how he's going to approach what's going on in Iran. And it's a more aggressive stance, and I'm incredibly pleased. I'm actually going to share a little bit of family history to put this in perspective. I always call myself and my generation, the baby boomers, not just baby boomers, but the last of the World War II generation. Every adult in our world had experienced World War II in some capacity, whether on the home front or in the battlefield or in the concentration camps. Certainly in my world, every adult was either a refugee, a concentration camp survivor, or a fighter. My dad actually fought in two wars. He escaped Nazi Germany in 1935 and made it to British Mandate Palestine, which is modern Israel. In 1940, he enlisted in the Royal Air Force and never really known what he did. Technically, he was a gas pump guy. He was in charge of keeping cars fueled and stuff for the military. But in fact, he fought as an infantryman. He was somehow moved over to Anzac. He had a lot of experience in direct military conflicts. He was, the ones I remember him talking about were the retreat from Crete, where the Nazis bombed them relentlessly at the ports. They strafed them and bombed them for 3 days as the British stood in line trying to get onto ships to evacuate Crete. And he also fought at El Alamein. He did some sort of reconnaissance in the North African desert. He was in Egypt. So it's very hazy to me what my dad's role in the war was. The one thing I know is that my dad knew war. And then in 1947 to 48, my dad fought in the Israeli War of Independence. So he, like every other military-aged man and many women in Israel in 1947 and 48, got to do two wars, not just one. My dad knew war. He was a Democrat because he'd grown up a communist. He ended up voting for Ronald Reagan. I don't know what he did after Reagan, but in retrospect, I'm very proud of him for having made that choice. But he was a remarkably smart man, and he had a huge reserve of common sense. And despite his periodically telling me that communism just hadn't ever been done right, I think he fundamentally understood that it could not be done right. What he also understood, again, is how to fight a war. And I remember him sitting at the kitchen table, looking at the nightly news about the Vietnam War and grumbling that you don't sort of fight a war. You either fight a war to win or you shouldn't bother. And he said exactly the same thing about the first Gulf War. And I remember how disgusted he was during a news report during this short war when American troops were saying that they felt really sorry for the Iraqi soldiers, who were a pretty pathetic, cowardly bunch, frankly. But my dad said, you cannot kill people you feel sorry for. This is the enemy. It's kill or be killed. War is war. And what I learned from my dad and what I learned from being a history major is that the worst kind of war is one that you approach with delicacy in the hope of not disturbing your enemy too much, or perhaps not disturbing yourself too much. With war, the ripping off the Band-Aid is always the better way. Long drawn-out wars are the most destructive wars there are. So we did long drawn out in Vietnam. It was a disaster. Long drawn out in Iraq, long drawn out in Afghanistan. This is the nature lately of American war because we have within the American system, very open and proud, a fifth column that is desperately against America in any war. So America is not only fighting a war against foreign enemies, but always fighting a war against domestic enemies. And that's certainly been the case with Iran. Iran has, I don't need to rehash it for you. Iran is an incredibly dangerous geopolitical enemy because it wants to go nuclear. Once Iran goes nuclear, the entire balance of world power changes. We are at a stable point. I wish countries like Pakistan and India and North Korea were not nuclear. Right now, I wish England weren't because it's becoming increasingly Muslim. But there is a fragility here, but it's stable. Once Iran goes nuclear, all bets are off because the 12ers in Iran believe that it is their responsibility to bring about the apocalypse so that the hidden imam returns and begins the era of a glorious caliphate worldwide, of course, led by Iran. Trump was absolutely right, but it's not just that. Iran has been at war with America since 1979, sometimes rhetorical, often very real. The Beirut barracks bombing, various bombings across the world, they're destabilizing, killing American troops in Iraq. So it's always been a hot and cold war, but it's been an active war. So Trump, I think, continue to think, was very right, and I loved the way the war started, which was an absolute blitz, which was just taking out the military leadership, taking out the political leadership. I mean, taking out military installations, taking out their air defenses, taking out, of course, their nuclear facilities to the extent we knew whether they were. This is how you fight a war. You go in, you get it done really quick, really hard, and then it all stopped. I think some of it was because the J.D. Vance school of thinking said no more war, let's negotiate this. I also think, frankly, Trump, as a pragmatist, understood that he absolutely needed to get fuel prices down. And having a pause allowed him to do that. Throughout, since February 28th, Trump's kept doing announcements and speeding up and slowing down the war to get fuel prices down. He's been very aware of that. And he also, with the midterms coming up, and he also needed to get the War Powers Act off his back. But now it's started again. Iran never intended for there to be a negotiated settlement. It was just buying time, and it helped buy time for our military and the Israeli military. I'm sure that the Khamenei's funeral allowed both Israel and the U.S. to start tracking exactly where all of the political and IRGC leaders are again. When they left the funeral, I hope many of them left with a target on their back. In any event, if you're going to fight a war, as my dad always said, you fight a war to win it. And that's where I get to Trump's announcement today. Written at 8:56 a.m. Eastern Time on July 22nd, from this point forward, anytime the Islamic Republic of Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it be by missile, rocket, drone, or any other device or weapon, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. That is exactly the right approach, because one of the things that every Bible reading person should remember, I write about this every Passover, why did God have the 10 plagues? Why didn't he just snatch the Jews out of Egypt? Part of it, of course, is every plague was symbolic. A lot of the plagues represented attacking specific Egyptian gods. So, and you could also say it was for narrative tension. But one of the things I've long believed is that what the Bible is telling us is that a tyrant will not stop until the war is at his door. Think of Saddam Hussein finally hiding out in a hole. Until the war is at his door and in his home, the tyrant doesn't care about his people suffering. Heck, Iran has been killing tens of thousands of Iranians just since January, and it's on a killing streak now in its prisons. What Trump has just done is brought the war to Iran's door. The mullahs now know, and it's painful. The Iranian people are good people, but a lot of them, this is all they know. They may hate the mullahs, but it's not entirely clear that they'll go a pro-American route when all this is over. There are a lot of assumptions built into that. But the one thing we know is that until they know that it's over for them, they will not stop. And if you want a more recent example, look at Sherman's march through Georgia. The Confederacy did not stop fighting until it was on their home turf and there was nowhere left to go. And you could still have guerrilla fighting. in Missouri and everything, the Civil War went on for another 20 years. A lot of the famous criminals of that era were still fighting out the Civil War, and I'm thinking maybe Jesse James was one of those people. So, because I read a book about it, that's why I think it was still a Confederate fight against the Yankees. So things can simmer for a long time, but wars definitively end when those who are in control know that it's over for them. So bravo to President Trump for making the correct decision and letting the mullahs know that there is no pinprick that will not be met with a big, big bomb. So yay for Trump. And on that truly cheerful note, thank you very much for watching this video. I always appreciate the time you spend with me.